So recently I talked about the idea of Eldians escaping into the world thanks to Eren and his determination right now. His declaration to completely obliterate the entirety of the Earth by using the Founding Titan's abilities. Now obviously there is a lot of different ideas here, and one that's more so been in the back of my mind for quite a bit of time now is if this destruction does take place, how do we get some sort of conclusion? Do we get the conclusion with the destruction and we kind of just live on from there with the Eldians being the only people on Earth basically to exist and Paradise being the only island that is inhabitable? Or is this all more so a facade to a certain extent? The declaration of Eren's words is definitely real and holds a lot of weight and power behind them, but the result I think is not going to be on such a grand scale. But in that sense, I could be completely wrong, because the idea of the entirety of the world being destroyed just seems like a very odd ending. It's a good goal, it's a good end point, and it's well and truly happening, but I do think it's going to be stopped somehow, whether it's by Zeke, whether it's more so by Armin, humanity's savior, in terms of getting closer with Eren or managing to persuade him or anything between those lines, right? There's an abundance of different ways that this can go about. The biggest question when it comes to getting rid of the Titans specifically is that even if we do get rid of all the Titans and made Titan shifting impossible, meaning that everything that's kind of related to Titans right now would well and truly cease to exist, the Titan shifters would lose their abilities, the Titans that are already roaming would either be killed or reverted or, whatever, and the Titan serum would be ineffective, meaning that everything would be stopped, there'd be no way to produce them. But the biggest thing that comes from that is that the more so subjugation, the racism, the hatred would still be there. Marley would push forward and probably even obliterate Eldians off the face of the earth because they don't have this powerhouse at the moment. They don't have the abilities of the Titans and nothing to realistically protect them. So how do we get rid of that? How do we remove the biggest problem, which would be Marleyans and the hatred towards Eldians specifically? One of the easiest and I guess more methodical conclusions for it would be for Eldians to disappear, and not in the sense of euthanization, not in the sense of just vanishing or killing absolutely everyone, but disappearing into humanity. Where this comes from is more so the idea of what the story is trying to push forward, propelling towards freedom and doing anything at any cost to absolutely get it. Zeke and Eren are on two completely different paths with two completely different outcomes. On one hand, obviously Zeke wants to euthanize the entire race. That buys them not really much time to exist, and in under 100 years everyone will kind of be well and truly gone and the rest of the world will live on. Eren, on the other hand, is more so for destruction, obliterating absolutely everyone that may not even have hatred towards them, killing men, women and children across the entirety of the globe to set his own people free. Now it does a great job in showing Eren's determination and everything that he has to do to get to this point, because peace is no longer an opportunity, which we just found out, so something has to be put into action, something of grand scale, and what Eren is doing is that grand scale. But that doesn't necessarily mean he has to obliterate everything. Going back to Armin potentially persuading him or giving him a different option halfway through it, I think destroying a good portion of the earth, or at least Marley specifically, would buy them enough time for Eldians to escape into the world. This also goes back to the idea that Eren can connect Paradise to the rest of the world in some way, shape or form, using the Titans and raising land out of the water, pretty much forming it in itself because of how vicious and massive these Titans are. I think it would be a very good showcase of power, but also the possibilities of new endeavors. The destruction is there, but not on that massive scale where the entirety of the earth vanishes in a blink of an eye. Instead, we take out probably the biggest issue, or at least showcase his power to such a degree, while the Eldians pretty much escape. But there's a couple of things that have to be recognized for this to potentially be a possibility. They mentioned recently blood testing, which is something I found a little bit unorthodox for the chapter in itself. There was really no reason to actually point it out. It's nice to know, but it was weirdly placed within there. They were mentioning that across the globe people would do blood tests to actually recognize Eldian people, because obviously they have a specific bloodline. If that testing wasn't there, how could you really tell who an Eldian is? What if we obliterate the Eldian bloodline bloodline completely and make it impossible for people to recognize them even through blood tests, right? This would pretty much shake up the core of the world completely. There would be no way to distinguish who is an Eldian or who is this type of nationality or this or that type of person, because theoretically, if we follow what Zeke was trying to do in terms of euthanizing an entire race, which has some form of connection of altering more so the bloodline, I assume, of Eldians by using the Founding Titan ability, that's a pretty big thing that stops both men and women being able to produce any sort of children, right, on both different sides. I'd assume that would go down to more of the detailed version of a bloodline. So if Eren could do something similar to this and pretty much eradicate the Eldian bloodline completely, changing them or taking away the Titan thing specifically, or allowing it so other nations could not do blood tests to recognize who these Eldians were, if there was an opportunity for all of them to escape thanks to Eren's destruction that he causes, they could actually scatter across the globe, and Eldians would no longer exist technically, and they would take up lives in different countries and nations. The hatred is obviously still there for Eldians, but the Eldians don't exist. There's no way that they could realistically find them. And if Eren causes enough destruction across the globe, not necessarily obliterating absolutely everyone, but dislodging the whole ideology and the hatred towards Eldians, the people that are stuck in camps, for example within Mali, and even potentially other places across the globe, could be set free because of this destruction and could be able to escape. It's pretty much trying to divert all of the attention to Eren, which is something that seemingly is what he is doing. He's taking all of the attention, all of the spotlight, causing all of this destruction, but it may not be to that grand scale of obliterating the entirety of the human race. It could be just enough destruction to dislodge the hatred for quite a bit of time, so Eldians within camps and within paradise can walk across these land bridges that Eren potentially could create and escape into the world. It does sound extremely far-fetched when you put it like that they would have to walk across a land bridge, but I think the idea itself is so honed into the ideology of freedom, and this is what the story is well and truly about. You get rid of the hatred, you get rid of Eldians, you get rid of the Titan shifting ability. The Eldian people could well and truly exist outside and even thrive without even being noticed. There would be no way for them to be recognized using the blood test, and we've already seen that the looks and the justification of what an Eldian person is not really a thing. They usually base it on people's actions or their blood specifically, not necessarily what they look like, which I've always found interesting. It'd be very wrong for a government or some sort of political party to subjugate an entire type of people going down that line of racism and bigotry because of what they look like. That person looks like an Eldian, but then they do a blood test and the Eldian quote-unquote example is not there to be found. There's no way they can really put that person in a camp or be even suspicious of them. Not to mention you take in the billions upon billions of people on Earth and how the Eldians only make up a very small percentage, a very small fraction of what's out there. I think the possibility of living, the possibility of thriving, the possibility of surviving is well and truly there. But the only way that we can get there, jumping over that hatred that's always going to be there for Eldians, is by removing the Titans, removing the Eldian bloodline, making it unrecognizable, but also destruction. And I think the destruction is the key part of it, on top of everything. Without the destruction, there would really be no way for Eldians to escape into the world. Attention would not be diverted from them. No one would be looking at Eren. The hatred would well and truly be there, and Eldians would still be kind of situated the exact same way. So in that sense, the destruction is a necessary kind of action to dislodge everything and potentially buy enough time for people to be set free. All of this kind of boils down to Eren doing this for his people, and I really have a hard time thinking that he's going to survive after all of this. I think he well and truly will go down swinging, and his goal to destroy the Earth may be 100% legitimate. His declaration of war seems 100% real. It doesn't seem like he's putting on a facade or if he has ulterior motives. He seems well and truly situated for that outcome, and he's ready to do it. So I do think there's going to be something here that either persuades him or reels him back to reality to some sort of degree, and Armin, being humanity's savior, may come up with that idea. He may come up with the idea that we could eradicate the Eldian bloodline and hide people in plain sight. If Eren is given an option like that, potentially, he will most likely take it. At least I assume that he would most likely take it. But it also depends on how far gone Eren truly is. Obviously, he wants what's best for his people. If somehow Armin can reassure him that this bloodline trick will work, that the Eldians can live in plain sight across the entirety of the globe without having any hatred or prejudice towards them, just maybe the possibility of Eren changing his mind or slowing his destruction could be a thing. The self-realization of freedom and the continuation of the human race kind of lies directly within the hand of Eren at the moment, and someone or something needs to tap into it to reel him back to reality. There is definitely a lot of different ways that this can go, and obviously the idea of Eren destroying the world is such a massive thing. But in the back of my mind, ending off this story with all of that death and destruction, killing billions upon billions of people, just doesn't sit all too concretely with me. I do think there's something else here. I do think Eren is realistically trying to do this, but something else will come into play. Something that we've been waiting for quite a bit of time, and I do think that is well and truly Armin. If anyone can talk sense into Eren, it is going to be Armin or Mikasa, and if it's anyone that's going to come up with a different idea, it's either going to be Zeke and Armin together. But at this point I don't really have much faith in Zeke, so it's going to go over to Armin. With whatever way this potentially goes, there is death and destruction that's going to follow it. What depends is how much death and destruction is there going to be. Is it going to be thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, or billions of people? The scale of it and Eren's quote-unquote sacrifice potentially doesn't really get him all too far if he obliterates the entirety of the earth and makes it uninhabitable, unless he plans to rebuild everything. Or we could move into a more comfortable situation, but also Eldians disappearing from the face of the earth and blending in and becoming quote-unquote regular people. The bloodline is a curse, the Eldians are cursed, so why not free them from that? If it is potentially possible, I think it would be an interesting outcome to see it kind of unfold like that, but I guess only time will tell. So with that being said, that is basically it. Let me know how you guys feel and what you think Eren is going to do. Do you think Eren's going to literally obliterate the entirety of the earth, or do you think there's going to be something else here? Whether he has something else up his sleeve, or if Armin's going to reel him back to reality, or if you think potentially Eldians are going to escape and live outside of paradise, blending in with society. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I'm actually going to end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.